Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'd like to call to order the Metropolitan Governance Task Force for this Wednesday, November 1st. And I also wanted to let people know that in addition to the members that are in the room, we have Renee Piera-Webb joining us remotely, Commissioner Green, Senator Port, Senator Coleman, and Mr. Jeff Reed also joining us virtually. So, in terms of our agenda today, I wanted to first have a adoption of our previous minutes meetings, and then we'll have a quick update on public engagement. I actually would want to do the public engagement maybe last so we can get right to our presentation of Portland Metro. So minutes, yes, Representative Weens.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the minutes from our October 25th Metropolitan Governance Task Force.
Okay, discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the motion prevails. Thank you. So, members, I wanted to make a quick announcement about kind of where we're heading in terms of some of these presentations that we're about to hear. This is going to be the first in a series where we have taken some input from members of the public and members of the committee around different models of governance from around the country. And I think this is going to be very important to our work moving forward. We have a lot of options that we want to discuss and get more information on so that we can move forward with a possible set of recommendations coming out of this task force to the broader legislature. That is our charge. So we are going to be looking at a council of governments model. We're going to be looking at the idea of an issue that a task force member had raised about separating out a transit from a broader metro governance. Of course, staggered terms is on the table. We've heard from the public about a combination of appointed and elected officials, and other ideas, many creative ideas that perhaps we haven't heard. But again, I will say that, in terms of the models that we are most familiar with, that I think we really want to get additional detail on, that is a council of governments. And of course, we have the model that many people have spoken of over the years coming out of Portland, which is direct election. So today we're going to start with Portland. And the reason we have the Metro President, Lynn Peterson, who's here in person. And we chose today because Chair Peterson is in town for a conference, also has family in Senator Coleman in Chanhassen. And so she's visiting family and is also going to be here at a conference at the University of Minnesota. So we're really pleased that we could have her in person as part of her travels here in Minnesota. And so what we've asked, and Senator Pratt and I had a nice meeting with on Zoom with Council President Peterson and some members of her staff, and we talked, gave her some background on the the task force and what our goals are, and some questions that she may likely hear from us, both people that may have concerns about direct election, but others that are supportive. I think we have a mixture of opinions. But again, I would ask people just to be open and listen and certainly ask your questions and express concerns. Following this, I just want to walk folks through the agenda. There is Portland does have a model where they have the elected Metro equivalent of Metro Council, but they have a separate transit organization called TriMet. And that's interesting to me. That's appointed by the governor, right? So we have again, their elected body is separate from the transit agency. So that's a very interesting model, so we can kind of look at that today again. And then thanks to Mayor Hovland, we're going to have, on a different day, Mayor Hovland suggested that we have a member of the municipal government from Portland talk, and so Mayor Hovland had suggested the former mayor, and we won't have him today, he's traveling, but we will have him at a different time. So thank you, Mayor Hovland, and this is an example of, again, a member of the task force suggesting somebody. So that's our agenda. We'll have a little bit more on our vision and goal-setting piece if we have time, and then I would also like to talk about public engagement. So with that, Chair, welcome to our committee, and please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Well, good morning, Chair Hornstein and Vice Chair Pratt. Thank you so much, committee members, for having me here. Lynn Peterson, Metro Council President. My background is in transportation. I started my career at Wisconsin DOT, having been raised in Madison and worked in Madison, moved to Portland in 1993, not knowing it was the central hub of planning activity. I was looking for a change, moving up the decision-making process from engineering, which is kind of the doers, right, up to the decision-making of how do we actually build communities with transportation projects, and landed in Portland. But it's, we've got a very, very deep land use planning program at the state level, and so there's an overlay to everything I'm talking about. When it comes to this conversation about our governance, it's kind of tied to how we think about, as a culture in Oregon, community engagement, and how that ties to land use decisions. So just keep that broad umbrella over your head that that culture has been established in 1973, coming out of an anti-Californication type of thought process. So, and yeah, I do have a mouth. So I'm honored to be here today. I have a few slides I want to walk through and then open for any conversation. This first slide, I just wanted to kind of give you a broader context, and then we can dive deeper into the pros and cons of regional government structures and regional collaboration. At the high level, the geographic context of the region, I would like to walk through the charter structure, the operational structure, a quick framework of how we are funded, the work we do and how we operationalize portions of that as a region with advisory bodies and committees, which I think is really important to your discussion, and then end with a broad overview of how we have been bringing the region together to get bigger things done. So let's start with a bit of the geographic context. The region is situated between the Coast Mountain Range and the Cascade Mountain Range. So we do have a tight framework of land use that we sit in. And to the north, we have the Columbia River that you can see running through, and Washington State sits on the north side of the Columbia River. And the Willamette Valley is to the south, which is the highest productivity farmland in the state and very highly protected by the Oregon Land Use Planning Program. So we sit between forest and farm, and that is why we work so hard to plan inside the urban growth boundary for livability on all of the issues that we work on, because we are trying to make sure that we have enough natural resource base for farm and forest. Next slide, please. Oop.
Sorry, guys,
It's a PDF, I apologize. Because we are set up as a service district, we cover the 23 cities and most of the 3 counties, Multnomah, Washington, and Clackamas. Here you can see the majority of the cities in our district, and the largest in yellow in the center is the city of Portland. The population of the metropolitan service area, which includes Vancouver to the north, is 2.2 million. The region is closer to 1.8 million in Oregon, and the city of Portland is about 650,000 of that. Well, you have heard on the news that the city of Portland is the whitest city in America. That does not represent the entirety of the region. Washington County to the west population is 18% Hispanic or Latino and 13% Asian, while the city of Gresham on the east side of the region is very similar. Metro Council has been diligent in moving a very aggressive DEI agenda in all of our business lines, from staff hiring to community-based organization capacity building, to who is appointed to advisory bodies, to who, where, and how we invest in our region, as well as changing our procurement rules and working with our jurisdictions to change their procurement rules to allow for minority contractors to be able to fairly win bids. So next slide. We can talk about our home rule charter that was created by a vote of the people. So Metro is a relatively young regional government. We were formed in the merger of what we call the Metropolitan Service District, which was our waste and recycling, and the Columbia River Association of Governments in 1979. The Columbia Region Association of Governments was our COG. Everybody hated it. Nobody liked it. At the time in Oregon's history when the state was establishing strong land use planning and land conservation goals and laws, one of the new functions added to this MPO was that Metro was given the authority to manage growth. In the consolidation ballot measure, though, we referred it to the regional voters, the title, and this is important. The title was Reorganize the Metropolitan Service District, Abolish CRAG, or the Columbia River Association of Governments, which was the COG. Because people did not like the COG type of government, Abolish CRAG was what passed this measure. I want to be clear. I don't know if everybody who was voting in 1979 really realized that they were creating this authority within a new regional government. They just didn't like CRAG. The original structure of the council and the agency leadership has changed over time, which I think is a major part of any governance conversation, is the learning loops that you put into this conversation, not only to get to what you think it should be, but what happens afterwards. You should have some sort of conversation about what should be reviewed and discussed and create those learning loops, because nobody should assume that any government structure is perfect and that there might need to be some small tweaks, right? And you should build that into the conversation. We just went through this with the city of Portland, changed their form of government, which we can also talk about, and that was not built in, and I think it's created very poor expectations on the part of the residents that it's either this or this, and we're going to vote up or down on perfection, right? Rather than learning over time and setting up an expectation of a conversation with your residents. So in 1992, the voters approved a home rule charter, created a council manager form of government, and reduced the number of councilors from 13 to 17. So I skipped over something. The original construct in 1979 was that there would be 13 councilors and an elected COO. And having worked at Metro back when this government structure 25 years ago was in place, it was nasty because the COO was elected, right, and thought that they had policy decision-making as well as the ability to run the agency. And the 13 electeds thought that they had policy-making, and it was nothing but loggerheads between the two. So in 1992, that was changed. The COO was no longer an elected position. It went to become an appointed by the council president with approval from the council itself. So we have, in the last 5 years, since I've been there in the first year, we did get a new COO, and I also have the authority to appoint the attorney with approval from the council. So those are the two of the three big authorities I have as a council president. The third is the appointment to the commissions and the advisory committees. At the same time, the Expo Center was transferred in 1992 from Multnomah County to the region, and several large Multnomah County parks, Multnomah being most of Portland, were gifted to the region. This meant we now added new business lines to Metro. So we had the waste and recycling, we had the growth management, and some new venues. Suddenly, we had a very large venue, portfolio, and we added parks. The charter also created an independent elected auditor position to evaluate program management in 1992. Under the current structure, the council president, as I said, sets the council agenda, appoints the chief operating officer and metro attorney with confirmation from the council, and appoints folks. The council sets policy, adopts a budget, and the COO manages agency staff, just like council, city manager, county commission, county administrator. The COO oversees a diverse workforce of more than 1,600 employees, including park rangers, economists, teachers, scientists, designers, planners, animal keepers, stagehands, and cartographers. Next slide. This should give you a little overview of what that structure looks like, and I just want to quickly walk through this. Obviously, the Metro citizens make a large part of the decisions of who is elected on the Metro Council, and they vote for the Metro Auditor. Off to the side, on the same level, you'll see the Metropolitan Exposition Recreation Commission. I just want you to hold that in your mind as we go through, because again, how we're structured is a major part of how folks were negotiating what does regional mean at the time and what authority they were willing to give Metro Council and what authority they were willing to not. They wanted to retain as a regional separate body. So you see the Metropolitan Exposition Recreation Commission has a separate authority, and we'll get into that. And then the Metro Council oversees the Office of the Metro Attorney and the Chief Operating Officer, and then the Chief Operating Officer has the divisions underneath them and all of the HR, finance, DEI, all of that. Next slide. The counselors, the district counselors are divided into 6 parts of the region. And I am elected for the entirety of the region at large, and that's about 2.5 congressional districts in equivalency. Districts were in population. Districts were established to represent distinct communities of interest with an effort to keep cities and cohesive neighborhoods as much as possible. Next slide. I think understanding how we are funded is also part of understanding a governance structure. When we were set up with our home rule charter, we do have a property tax base, but it is very, very tiny, and it does not change. So you'll see in the slide that only 18% of our funding comes from property tax. The rest is through a complex system of very specific funding for each of our enterprises, which are the departments. It comes through excise taxes on our waste, our Oregon Convention Center. We have a construction excise tax for homes that goes to planning for the future. In the jurisdictions, we give it out as grants. We have bonds, we have levies. I have put to the ballot 5 ballot measures in the last 5 years, 4 or 5 passed. It's a lot of ballot measures. We are very ballot measure driven. An income tax that we can go through, which is brand new in state and federal grants. Next slide. Our lines of work include, as I mentioned, the venues, which the day-to-day operation we'll talk about is by MERC, the Metropolitan Exposition Recreation. The Oregon Zoo is a separate function. Parks and Nature are 18,000 acres of parks and nature that we now oversee. And within the regional context, we do not have pocket parks, and they are not for kids to play on, equipment. The purpose of the Metro regional system is to purchase land, to be able to restore habitat, to increase our clean air and clean water. And the simple way to think about it is bringing the salmon back upriver, so that we restore our natural habitats as we grow, because we had lost a lot of that as we were growing in the 80s and 90s. So how do we restore and how do we get back? You put it into public ownership. Again, we have the entire waste management regulation, and we have 2 transfer stations. We have a new supportive housing service measure that we passed that was supposed to be bringing in $250 million a year for 10 years to reduce, to end chronic homelessness within that 10-year period. It is now bringing in $350 to $400 million, so we have a lot of decision-making we need to do there. And then we are the federally designated MPO for transportation, and under the Oregon Land Use Planning Program, we have the Land Use Authority and other grant-making and technical committees. So it's a wide-ranging, different set of things that we have been asked to do. Next slide. I just want to give you some examples. Again, when you're talking about structure, we are the Federal Transportation Funding Organization. We do the Regional Transportation Plan, and we have the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program underneath us. But it is a joint collaborative structure with a joint policy advisory committee on transportation, which is essentially a small cog, Council of Governments. So what happens is that there are about 3 representatives elected from each of the 3 counties, which gets you to about 9 members that are elected. So you have 1 person from each of the 3 county commissions. You have the largest city represented within each county, and then another city that is chosen from within the county electeds who will be that 3rd member from a council, a city within. So there's 3 positions from each of the 3 counties. There is also 3 metro councilors on this, and the chair of the committee is always a metro councilor. So we have a lot of, and then we have the agency reps all at the table. Vancouver, Washington, and Clark County across the river are also represented, but they do not vote. So when a decision is made, either on a project or on the regional transportation plan, which is adopted every 5 years, or the funding for the MTIP, that decision is discussed and made inside the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation, which I've sat on. But then it goes to the Metro Council for confirmation. We cannot vote it down. We can only vote for it or send it back to JPAC. So it could flip back and forth forever. It has never done so. We have great staff who really work to make sure that anything that is happening within JPAC, they are discussing it with the Metro Council concurrently and making sure that there are the votes to pass the recommendation from JPAC. But it does provide that opportunity for the local jurisdictions to make their proposal and then have a regional lens put on it and make sure that the conversation is happening. Does this meet a complex regional need? Because all of these systems should not be just viewed from a jurisdictional standpoint alone, right? They need to be put in their larger context and what the goals that we're trying to achieve are as a region, whether that be greenhouse gas emissions, whether that be racial equity, whether that be land use itself and jobs. And right, are we getting the jobs and are we getting the housing that we need off of these decisions? So that one part of the region isn't given full force of all the investment, there still needs to be that regional kind of umbrella. All right, next slide. So as I said, we have a statewide land use planning program. This is our 2040 regional map, which needs to be updated. We were about to do that during COVID, and I didn't think that anybody wanted to talk about a 50-year plan for the future in the middle of a pandemic. So we have our 2040 growth concept, and what you can see, it was one of the first in the region, in fact, it was the first in the nation, to use scenario planning to look at how we wanted to grow. So what you see here with the darker pink areas are our densest, most transit-oriented development tied together on the corridors. So it's centers and corridors based, which is pretty much the standard now throughout the United States for regional planning conversation. But I wanted to point out the area outside the region. You can see kind of in yellow, basically the single-family housing all the way out to the edge. Along the edge of our boundary, we now have urban and rural reserves for the future. We wanted to say for the next 50 years, let's stop the fight about each individual parcel at the edge as we grow to move our urban growth boundary. So in gray, what you're seeing is the areas in which we will have, we have complete unanimity? We have a complete agreement around the region. I'm an engineer, I don't use words well. We have complete agreement around the region that we will grow into those gray areas, and then for the next 50 years, in the parts in green, that big green swath is where we will not grow over the next 50 years. Now, at the end of those 50 years, we have another conversation to have. But it makes it a lot easier to just focus it on the gray areas than everything around the urban growth boundary. And that was actually set in stone by the Oregon legislature because we had so many lawsuits. So a final decision was made, the Oregon legislature. So we hold that authority to move the urban growth boundary as part of our home rule charter, but also part of the Oregon State Land Use Planning Rules and Authority. So over the past 30 years, we have brought the region together to plan for growth. This is not easy. It is full of tension. Until we took on the homeless service measure, I would say this is the most difficult political thing that we did every 6 years. Metro has brought our region together to plan for the future multiple times. The map, again, what we're trying to achieve within the urban growth boundary is to densify as much as we can and not move the urban growth boundary. But however, we are willing to move the urban growth boundary and have done just that in the last year. As a result of the collaboration, Metro and our other 3 counties adopted that urban and rural reserves, and every 6 years we evaluate the demand for housing and jobs and the availability of land inside the UGB to accommodate people. We convene and seek the advice of our cities and counties on another committee that is made up just like JPACT, only it's for the land use side. And it's called MPAC, the Metropolitan Planning Advisory Committee. And they make recommendations to us on all land use decisions. Now, there's no money involved, so it's a slightly different conversation, and they really truly are recommendations. And we do have other people sitting on this committee that are more than just elected and more than just agencies. They represent school districts and citizens at large. The planning that regional leaders did 30 years ago was prescient because problems they could not foresee will require us again to convene the region, develop new visions of how we grow and thrive, which we are in the middle of right now. So I want to wrap this up with the venues conversation, which is the next slide. This is the Metropolitan Exposition and Recreation Commission, as you remember, was on the same line of authority almost as the Metro Council and the auditor. It is, the Recreation Commission works to protect the public investment in 3 regional assets, the Oregon Convention Center, the Portland Expo Center, and we manage and operate on behalf of the city of Portland, the Keller, which is essentially a music hall, the Symphony Center, which is the Schnitzer Center, and then a performing arts center, which is mostly where the kids do a lot of performing in small theater. The commissioners are appointed by the Metro Council upon recommendation from local area governments. The commission includes 7 members representing the city of Portland, Metro, and 1 each for Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington counties. The commissioners serve 4-year terms. It is a creation out of the need for regional representation when Metro was first created, and it was supposed to be the first conversation of how Metro would actually take over TriMet, which is in our charter. We have never taken over TriMet, but it was supposed to be a similar idea that there would be a commission that would oversee TriMet underneath the Metro Council. That's why I wanted to point it out. We have never done that, but it was set up to represent how it could be done. The commission's authority is over day-to-day operational decisions such as facility fees and marketing. The Metro Council's authority is to set agency-wide policies that would still apply to the venues as environmental, minority contracting, DEI, and employer of choice type of policies. There is some revenue sharing here with the Visitor Development Fund within Multnomah County, which helps us run the venues. And then finally, working with our partners. Next slide. A key theme with all of this is that Metro is the region's convener. I noted the formal advisory tables we use to convene our local governments, JPAC and MPAC on transportation and land use. And MERC, we also have a new regional table, our Committee on Racial Equity, or CORE, who advises us on how to implement Metro's strategic plan to advance racial equity, diversity, and inclusion in our policies and investments. We also bring together tables to develop key investment measures, recently the Affordable Housing Bond, a Parks and Nature Bond, a Transportation Funding Measure. These committees were very large and appointed by me, up to 35 members. Each of these stakeholder tables brought together leaders in the business community, local elected officials, community leaders, especially those representing people of color. We also convene oversight committees to hold Metro accountable. There is a Housing Bond Oversight Committee and a Homeless Service Oversight Committee and a Parks Oversight Committee. And we convene to plan and work together also with a tri-county planning body on the homeless service measure, not for the day-to-day operations, but how do we move this new venture forward to convene all 3 counties beyond just the boundaries of Metro. And lastly, for the first time ever, we have a urban growth boundary roundtable, which again convenes business, elected, and community leaders to look hard at our growth strategies and give us advice on planning for job growth, industrial land development, and greenfield and infill housing development, because a lot of folks in the community felt it was a black box because there's so much economic forecast and so much modeling that goes into this, that they wanted that black box opened, and I agreed. Having been a modeler at Metro 25 years ago, I think it's important for people to understand the assumptions, and so we're opening up every single one of those assumptions and letting them challenge us on it. I think that makes for a more robust conversation. So all in all, we are a complex system of many different decision-makings over many years that was based on the politics of consolidation and tension over regional authority, which will exist no matter what structure you have. There are many things that this council would like clarified in the future and changes within our modern issues of the day, including the fact that the counselor's pay is tied to a circuit court judge, so no pay advisory committee is necessary, but the district counselors are paid less than half-time at 1/3 pay of that circuit court judge, but put in close to full-time work. And the younger counselors work a full-time job on top of that. So there's no equity in this. We have the youngest and the most diverse council we have ever had in the history of the agency, and they are struggling to be able to do it all. So that's just one example of how we need to be in a learning and moving forward mode at all times. And then I think the entire council struggles with MERC and the authority and how do we move forward. An example is the Expo Center loses money. And so I was ready to honestly sell it. But what we came to a conclusion is when we worked with MERC, we found a new idea, and that is to take it from a trade show type of model, which was losing money, to a sports arena with a public-private partnership. So it's good. Again, there's tension, but working together, we found a way through that's an even better idea for the region than originally thought. So I will end it there and answer any questions, but I think what I want to leave you with is that there is tension no matter what. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair Peterson, and I really appreciate the presentation. I appreciate what you said at the end, that there's no easy answer to this. And, models that we might like or have bias towards, or models that we don't like or have bias against, there's no one-size-fits-all. This is going to be a process where we have to take what we think works best here, and but I think your advice is well taken, that there's going to be tensions no matter what. We're going to likely have many questions. I have a couple, but I'm going to wait till the end and just have the members kick it off. And first, we have Commissioner Bingham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And, members, if you could just give the chair a little about who you are and your background, or not a tremendous, who you represent, if you're an elected official or if you're a citizen member or representing an interest, who you are and who you're representing here on the task force. That would be great.
Of course, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And thank you, Chair Peterson. I'm Carla Bingham. I represent the 7-county metro area on counties, but previously spent 9 years here at the Capitol between both chambers. So this issue is near and dear to the metro area. Obviously, as you've indicated, counties are a partner with you. I had 2 questions. The metro auditor, do they do more than financial auditing? For example, do they do performance measures?
Yes.
Okay, could you maybe, not all of them, but can you list a couple of the other performance measures that they look into?
Yeah, so we just passed the supportive housing service measure, right? We're 2 years in. I believe that he is currently working on an audit, a financial audit of that. And then on the performance-based side, he just completed one on our waste, basically looking at safety, because our transfer stations are so out of date. And we do have a capital plan that we have not been able to implement yet. But there's that, he wanted to look at whether there was any recommendations, right? And any very specific things that we could focus in on.
Okay.
So both sides.
What about, like, Mr. Chair,
Commissioner.
what about, transit ridership performance? Or in Minnesota here, we have recycling goals that we have to meet based on a hierarchy that the legislature has put into place. Do they look at those types of things as well, as since this is under, waste management's under your purview?
Commissioner.
Chair, yeah, the auditor only has authority for audits under Metro's, for the work under Metro.
Okay.
So we do not oversee TriMet. They are a separate, the transit
Okay.
agency is a separate agency.
Okay.
However, we do hold the 50-year and the 20-year land use transportation plan. Within that context, there have been audits, if I'm recalling correctly, not just financial performance, but are we actually carrying out the plan with the goals that we said we wanted to do, like 45% mode split of transit to downtown Portland?
Got it.
Are we hitting those goals, right?
Got it. Mr. Chair, my final question is, can you elaborate more on how the RTP is chosen? You had mentioned that it's by the county through a local group. Can you explain, or if you have a document, can you forward that to us so that we can maybe see it for the sake of time? Maybe if you have like a specific document of that nomination process or how that works,
Yeah.
if you could forward that to staff, that could get out so that maybe other people have time to answer questions.
Yeah.
But I would.
President,
I'm-
you can ask you can respond briefly to Commissioner Bingham as well.
Yeah.
And send documents.
Chairperson, Commissioner, there's two parts of this, three parts answer. One is that the regional transportation plan that needs to be updated every 5 years per federal regulations is done through Metro generically. JPACT, the kind of Council of Governments model that's embedded, works on the policy with our staff. And the Metro Council sits over here. They create the RTP in agreement with us on goals, values, and then we adopt it as the council. So they make a recommendation, and we do it kind of in tandem, but they're the ones doing the major lifting. We're just following along. But we do have 3 members on there. So yeah, we can get you a copy of our latest, which I believe we just adopted or is about to be adopted.
Mr. Chair, maybe I missed.
Commissioner, sure.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Maybe I misspoke. You had mentioned the membership, I'm sorry, of the council. that-
Yes, we
Okay,
can
that's
get you
what I'm
that
talking about.
membership, yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
and maybe a little bit more explanation of
Yes.
how folks are.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, yeah, definitely. We will get you more information on the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation. The thing I wanted to also mention is that TriMet sits on JPACT, and we have a very unique relationship with TriMet. They are our sister agency. And having served Governor Inslee as the Washington Department of Transportation Secretary and working with Puget Sound, I think it's important to note that what Metro does is we do all of the EIS work for their bus rapid transit and light rail planning, and they implement that. And I think the beauty of that is that the implementer should not necessarily be in the position of planning on behalf of the region because you need to we do more scenario planning because of that. We look at all modes. Once we've chosen something, then TriMet steps in. But if you have a corridor and you don't know whether you want light rail or bus rapid transit, or it parallels a river, and we've looked at ferry service, we listen to the region of all of their ideas. We do the scenario planning, we then go do the EIS work, and then TriMet implements it. They are constantly with us the whole way, but I love that model. And I think it's an important model to think of. And again, I go back to what values are you trying to convene around? What outcomes do you want from this? And then that gets you to the actions of what governance model you want. Like, start from your values and get an agreement about that, because you'll never have agreement on the governance model if you aren't all focused on what you're trying to achieve. So I shouldn't lecture. I wasn't meant as a lecture.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Bingham. Those are excellent questions, and I think what you just said in terms of values will resonate with a number of our task force members. So here we have a growing list, and this is very important that we have time. We're not rushed here. We're going to have a presentation from TriMet after this, so I really want members to make sure that you have, via Zoom. And that's the transit agency in Portland. So we have 3 people on the list, and I hope it grows, but Commissioner Green, Professor Orfield, and Representative Weens. Commissioner Green. And
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our presenter. It's so interesting to hear how it's done. We talk a lot hypothetically about what's going on in Oregon, so really appreciate you sharing. My questions, I think, are a good segue from those of Commissioner Bingham, and let me share that I'm also a county commissioner for Hennepin County, which is one of the metro counties. And I'm really interested in this division of work with TriMet. So before you answered that question, I had sort of scratched down who does the planning, who does the building, and who's paying. And I guess from what you've said, it sounds like Metro does the planning. I'm not clear on who does the building. And then I'm a little unclear also on the financing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Chair. So, again, complex system. So Metro does the planning. We hold the regional transportation plan. We hold the land use transportation plan that we do together with the region. And we then, when we get down to a corridor or a part of the region that needs a sub-area kind of planning discussion, that is still Metro. And when we do the EIS work, that is still Metro. TriMet is a part and parcel of that, and the reason I love the system is that TriMet is in an operation mode set, and so they come in and they help make sure that as we move forward in an EIS process, an EIS process is made to document any mitigations. If you can, through the design and operation, as you're going along, mitigate in real time, you end up with something that everybody loves, rather than a pile of things that need to be mitigated and everybody hates, right? Because they don't know how you're going to mitigate it. So that's the beauty of the planning and working together. There's always going to be a tension between Metro and TriMet through those, but our staff do a really good job working together. The construction, the design and construction operation is all done by TriMet. The funding in Oregon, it's been through the couch cushions to get to funding. It has been dependent in the past on TIF, tax increment financing, urban renewal districts, which we had to put on hold in the city of Portland for equity reasons until that system could be revised so that it was more equitable and didn't create as much gentrification when those were created. But in the past, we've been very dependent on urban renewal districts for the majority of the local match coming out of each of the cities. Then we ask each city that like a light rail or bus rapid transit goes through to contribute to that capital cost as well. Because TriMet does not have necessarily a capital budget of its own. It has operating funds through an employer payroll tax because we do not have a sales tax. So they can have some capital inherent in that they pull out of their general fund, but it's not a giant capital budget. And we have not been in the past able to pass any kind of regional transportation measure. We just had one in 2020 during COVID. We were on track to pass it, and then there was no congestion. The other ways we do it is that we have in the past bonded our Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. So that's the federal money coming into the MPO, which is, not a ton of money, but we've bonded against that so that a stream of money was set aside for that 20 years that we could then renew on another project as we paid that down. So it's a complex financing for us, and then the state usually puts some money into on the capital side. But TriMet has the operating, maintenance, construction responsibility.
Thank you, President Peterson. Commissioner Green, did you have a follow-up?
Thank you. Yes, I was also intrigued by what you described about being a learning structure or having that learning loop. And I wondered, could you talk about how that's built in? And, an example would be great. And you specifically mentioned the pay issue. Is that going to sort of become part of a learning loop and get changed?
Yeah, I think we're slowly building. We had a huge set of priorities, and then when COVID and the pandemic slows everything down, right? So there is a series of conversations that the council would like to have with the voters. One is just modernizing our code, right? And making it in compliance with state. Things have changed at the state level. We need to be referring to different things. So there's just upkeep. Then there's the pay issue, which is an equity issue. And then there'll be a whole bunch of folks that will honestly ask us to consider TriMet being under Metro. So we'll have to decide if that's in scope. And I don't have a timeline on any of this so that J.C. Vanetta, who's next, does not freak out. But we are slowly building towards the need to have that conversation with our voters of how do we update Metro. I don't think we'll be looking for, I don't know what will actually get put into that scope. It could be even after I'm gone, because I'm limited to 2 terms and the councilors are 3 terms. So the majority of our council will live beyond me. So I can only predict that there is a conversation that needs to be had. What I do want to say is I have served as the chair of one of our 3 counties in the Portland metro region and on city council in one of our 23 cities. So I can also speak to that tension between both regional governments in our cities and counties.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Commissioner Green. We have Professor Orfield and Representative Weens after that. Professor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, I wanted to ask, some of the proposals that are out there are just to split transit out of the Met Council. And it seems to me, and maybe, I wonder what your opinion is, isn't regional land use planning, isn't that sort of an essential part of a good transit system? And also, if you have an MPO that isn't involved in transit or isn't doing land use planning, it could be hard to make a transit system work, it seems to me. And then another question is, it's also critical to have a good MPO that's flexing federal funds to support transit. What would you think of just the idea of breaking off transit from the Met Council be without the land use planning and without the federal ability to flex funds?
So I think my thinking on this, Chair, has changed over time. I also worked at TriMet for the general manager for several years as the strategic planning manager, and we put in place the first 5-year bus plan. And having gone out and talked to the region, there is an inherent tension between the level of service for bus, light rail, streetcar in the Portland core versus in the suburbs and the exurbs. And I think from my TriMet experience and having worked at Metro as well, really liked the idea that they were separate originally because it allowed Metro to do the planning and the agency to do the implementation. And because there's money involved of the MTIP from the federal government that you can flex, I felt like it would be difficult to separate Metro Council from that decision. You would always be feeding yourself instead of feeding the region, if that makes sense. I also was worried about having an elected body that oversaw a transit agency. When you look around the nation, and I would encourage you, the elected bodies of other transit agencies are made up of mostly people who do not take transit or do not like the way transit is put out there, even though they don't ride it. They're not pro-transit. They're not transit riders. And I think that makes it hard to have an efficient, effective transit provision when you don't have the lens of somebody. However, over time, I'm open to having the conversation and looking at the pros and cons. I just didn't want to spend a lot of time merging agencies. I'm more about the outcomes, so that's more of what motivates me. If you're just merging agencies because you think you'd have more control from an outside perspective looking in on the elected body versus an appointed body, is that really the outcome you're getting? I'm not sure, but I'm open to the conversation because we do need to have the suburbs and exurbs feel like they are part of the decision-making and that that they're going to be able to achieve their land use goals with transit. And I think that conversation has been very hard over time because of market conditions mostly, because our suburbs and exurbs are just growing into density. It's taken, the 20 to 30 years to actually achieve the 2040 land use concept, so.
Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you, Professor Orfield. We represent Weems, then represent Kosnick.
Mr. Chair, President Peterson, thank you very much. Mark Weens. I'm a freshman legislator from Washington County, which is in the East Metro. However, I spent a lifetime doing planning in the military, trying to find that elusive success with limited resources and then being inclusive of those that had skin in the game. So my question goes to, and thank you for this presentation, it goes to the land use planning piece and the MPAC. As you define your growth plates, and then where you have those preserves, the urban-rural preserves or set-asides, is it inclusive of those sort of rural communities that are along those growth plates? Are they included at the start, or are they sort of like, hey, it's your turn to grow? That's my initial question, then one follow-up, Chair.
Thank you. President.
Chair. So when we originally set up in the mid-1990s this conversation and the scenarios, it was out of defense conversations, right? Scenario planning was coming out of the defense industry. And it was the first application to land use and transportation planning. And so we had to create whole new models and a whole new way of thinking. And when we put it out to the public for basically a glorified polling, but it was with maps and it was a huge number of, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but like way beyond what you'd get in normal survey participation. So the region loves their urban growth boundary. They love their urban growth boundary. They know everything about it because it's pretty stark. You see it, there's a farm field on one side and their home's on the other. Everybody knows where the urban growth boundary is. The question to the public was, do you want to grow up? Do you want to grow out? Or do you want a combination of both? And the vast majority was a combination of both. So what we have seen now that there is an amazing amount of growth that even during the 2008 housing bubble, there were still so many people moving to Portland that both the communities outside the urban growth boundary have seen massive influx as well as inside, because there's no affordable housing inside. You need a $26 an hour pay to be able to afford a one-bedroom within the urban growth boundary anywhere. So we have now done both. We have densified inside, and we have had major impacts on the cities around. Is there the conversation is really at the state level about how they say they want to grow outside the urban growth boundaries. That's a conversation they have with the state. They don't want to talk to us, and they don't want us growing into them, but they want to be able to grow. So it's a difficult conversation, because the minute I enter a room, it's like this massive body, being representative that's going to take over, right? Where I would rather just have a conversation of, how do you want to grow? Do you want us to have an IGA with you about how we will do this, an MOU? We've tried that around the edge and been somewhat successful, but it's up to each and every. We have one city that's growing quite fast in our highest growth county in Washington County. And they are interested in having a conversation with us, but but you're not stopping us from growing, right? We'll have this conversation, but we're in an individual city and can make our own decisions, right? Local control.
Mr. Chair, follow-up, President. I think you probably answered this with the hybrid. It kind of depends on what it is. So if there is a community that's within the metro, or defined within the metro, that wants to do something else, it wants to stay more rural, maybe it can opt to be one of those urban rural places, and you're flexible enough to be able to see that in your planning and in your execution.
That is correct. We have no authority over any city outside the urban growth boundary. Inside, if they are not in compliance with the regional growth plan, we do have the authority, although we have never taken it, to take over their planning and zoning. That's in the home rule charter.
Okay.
Never have done it.
All right, we have Representative Koznick and then Senator Pratt.
Chair, can I just ask for her to repeat that last answer? I just want to make sure I fully comprehend what you're saying.
Okay, sure.
Would you please just go back and,
I
I'm
think
so
that-
sorry. I would
yeah,
ask that she please repeat the last answer so that I have a full understanding of what she's saying.
Sure, and I can get you the specific language, but it's within our home rule authority and within the Oregon state statutes that if because of our Oregon land use planning program, a city has a land use transportation plan, 20-year plan, that needs to be in compliance with the county. The county and all of their cities have to be in compliance with the regional plan, and the regional plan has to be in compliance with the state. So when any city updates their comprehensive growth plan, it needs to be in compliance with every single one of those steps. Now, with the regional authority, we can say you're not in compliance, and we can take over the planning, which then leads to zoning. So if you're densification, if you're not meeting household densification goals, if you've zoned it differently, that would be out of compliance.
Chair Cleaver, is that, do you want any more elaboration? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you for asking for the clarification. Representative Koznick, then Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chair, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate the opportunity to hear from your experience, and taking the time to be with us in person is fantastic, and I think it's very helpful. I've done a bunch of research kind of trying to understand how a model like this might work and some of the issues that you're facing, and we face them here in the metro, and they are very difficult issues, and there aren't easy solutions. In my research, there's a lot of problems in Portland, so don't take my questions or comments personally, but it's been quite obvious that the elected model has had no impact on socioeconomic disparities in the region. I watched your State of the Region with the City Club and, pick up a flavor of some of the issues that you're facing. Just this August, there was an article on one of the news stations that talked about the survey of concerns that people have, homelessness, tensions between the cities and the counties, and significantly crime. In fact, 72% of the people don't feel safe walking around in Portland at night. And that's, we have some similar issues in certain areas here as well. But I don't know that an elected council, regional council, has solving and making an impact on those. You talked about population just in the previous question and answer, but there's 59,000 less people during the workday in one of the main counties in your area. In fact, you're losing a significant population. One of the counties lost a record $1 billion in income between 2020 and 21, and more than 14,000 tax filers and their dependents have left. And so your mission of cohesive neighborhoods, that you use that term, I think it's admirable, but how do you address the high cost of housing that you just mentioned? Obviously, affordable housing is not being met. The tensions between cities and counties and the people that the regional governance has policy jurisdiction over kind of seems like it's almost a mini legislature. I read that initially the chair didn't have veto power. Over the course of time, now you do. I'm curious if you've ever exercised it, and that is if this is something that we consider. And then we can talk about elections, but I think I might hold that separately because, or
Yeah,
maybe
because
you
now
want
I've got too much
to
in my head.
comment that now. Some issues on elections, and so I just think that there's a lot of problems in Portland and with this model. And we have similar problems here in the Twin Cities, but I don't know, or help me understand why you think an elected regional governance is solving or making any headway on those issues that we're not already addressing.
And President, before you respond, Representative Kosik, do you want to just give a little background on you're a state rep and a little about your district?
I'm a state rep about 25 miles south of the core Minneapolis-St. Paul. In my 9th term, served on a variety of committees, transportation being one of them. Hopefully I'll be back on that.
And he represents a fast-growing city as well.
30th fastest growing in the country.
Okay, good. I knew it was fast-growing, but, Madam President.
Yeah, so let's separate out some issues. I'm going to leave Metro aside for a moment because I think if you just want to tackle what's going on in the state, in the Pacific Northwest, the West Coast, and actually the Ninth Circuit Court. This is the entire West Coast from Colorado over. So we have a series of things that have headed us into this direction where we have a very severe homelessness population problem within the entire West Coast. So one is that people were moving there, as I said, during the bubble, and that's part of what was driving up the home prices. The Portland metro region is actually the most affordable within that Ninth Circuit Court, even though we're unaffordable to anybody outside. Moving in, it is, compared to Seattle, compared to San Francisco, compared to LA, we are still, and Denver, we are still much more affordable, but we are unaffordable just within our own region, right? And that has been growing just like the rest of the West Coast. The homeless population issue comes down to the fact that the states, and specifically Oregon, have not put enough money either into public housing or into homeless shelters. Because as you know, the counties get their monies from the state and the feds in order to be able to do social services. The state has not done their job on that side, and because of with the fact that we did not have that funding until Metro passed the ballot measure, the Ninth Circuit Court decision out of Boise was that if you do not have enough temporary homeless shelter beds, you have to allow someone to camp in a public space. So we have been working our way towards getting the number of temporary homeless shelter beds up to the point where we can say no more camping. We are at that point almost. In downtown, the mayor has just said downtown is off limits, and then he will go out from there. The rest of our cities already had no camping laws, so they ended up moving into the city of Portland. That's why this tri-county, 3-county metropolitan service out of Metro, this funding measure was so important, is that all 3 counties needed to have more social service money in order to meet these requirements, and the affordable housing bond measure that we passed prior to that has allowed us to build now 4,700 units in the last 5 to 7 years that are either in permitting construction or open to the public. So we are making headway, and we are doing more than LA, San Francisco, or Seattle per capita in order to end chronic homelessness. So I would say it's the opposite of what you came away with. Metro has stepped in to a place that has never been before and had never thought it would be, but the region and the state asked us to go there. The governor, when she was Speaker of the House, said, I want Metro to do an affordable housing bond measure. And so we did. The supportive housing service measure was all 3 counties saying, oh my God, we have no resources. We have no resources. We need help, and we need to be coordinated, and we're not. So Metro, please help. It was all out of a grassroots level and a state legislative level. That's half the problem. The other half of the problem is one that I will spend all day on a soapbox about, is that our legislature, we are an anti-growth state. That is our culture. We can go back to Republican Governor Tom McCall, who created the Oregon Land Use Planning Program, who created the bottle bill, who was like the most forefront on conservation. But he basically told, and it's almost a direct quote, hey, Californians, visit, but don't stay. That growth, that anti-growth, sits within our decision-making of not putting money into infrastructure. So our state has not been there on sewer, they have not been there on water, and they have not been there on transportation. In the same time that Washington State has put $50 billion into roads and $55 billion into light rail, Oregon has put $2.5 billion into roads and $1 billion into light rail. So I would just say our cities have needed help for a very long time in order to grow, and they have not had that help. And that's what we are working on right now, is to ask the state to step up, because otherwise it is 100% on new growth to pay, and the developers can't make it work. So those are the things that we're juggling right now, and we, as Metro, have been asked to step in to both of those to help. We are not looked at as a stop growth, or the tension isn't there between the cities and the counties and the state. It is a partnership in order to get through this very tough moment.
Thank you. Representative, did you want to, I know you had a second question. Do you want to hold that, or do you want to follow through?
Yeah, we can talk
And
a little.
I have no authority over fentanyl problem. That's a separate problem.
Yeah, we can maybe talk about the elections.
Okay,
let other
yeah, we'll circle
later.
back to you then for that. We'll give you the last word.
Thank you.
But I only have one more member on the list, and that's Senator Pratt. Oh, sorry, Mayor Hovland. Okay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chair Peterson, or President Peterson, for being here today. It was a pleasure to talk to you a couple weeks ago. Just as a reminder, I'm Eric Pratt. I represent Senate District 54, which is most of Scott County in the Southwest Metro. You know, when you look at Minnesota, we have one of the largest legislatures in the country. We put a value on having our legislators, our representatives being accessible to the people they represent. How many, if I recall, right, what's the average number of residents that one of your counselors will represent?
The one number I didn't have.
Is it
Chair.
about 280,000?
I was going to say 250 or 280. I think when we talked, that's what staff said, yes.
And
Senator.
President Peterson, can you talk a little bit about those elections? I mean, because if I were to take that roughly 280,000, 270,000 would equate to about 5.5, almost 6 of our House districts here in the state of Minnesota. Can you talk about the elections? I know Representative Koznick was hinting at it. what do those look like? How much does it cost to run an election for a district that big?
Yeah, I think, honestly, surprisingly, not a lot. For my campaigns to win region-wide, it was under 350,000.
350.
And running for chair of the county, one of our counties, which was the smallest it was 250,000. So, it's also how much are people wanting to invest in it. In the past, when we had 13 members and we were a brand-new agency, the home builders and the environmentalists were on opposite sides and funding candidates, right? But now, it's not that stark. The same candidate will be taking money from both. I take money from both, right? So we've gotten to a point where it's more of a stability issue. So the home builders see Metro and the urban growth boundary as a stabilizer within the market because it's more predictable about where you're going to grow. And they also want to have a livable community. So a lot of these values, again, going back to the values, have started to overlap, and people see how it benefits them if Metro's buying up land in the backyard of a subdivision, right, to have a beautiful park. Suddenly, that subdivision has a lot more value to it because Metro was a part of buying up these large tracts of land that won't be developed. So there's this synergy that's been happening, but it's taken 50-plus years to get there, right? It didn't happen overnight. So I would say our counselors are raising and spending less than $50K. And a lot of what their outreach is more jurisdictional and agency and community-based organizations and chambers than necessarily town halls, like a representative or a city councilor, if that makes sense. We're kind of a level up.
Senator Pratt, did you have a follow-up?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was going to ask about really kind of two questions I'll bundle into one. Maybe a little history on why you went from 13 to 6 counselors, but also, how does that help with that transparency and accessibility?
I think she was,
I don't know.
you may not have an answer. I don't know. That was hilarious, by the way. You can continue. Senator Pratt, continue.
I'll
I
take
don't
that
know
as
if I
my
can.
answer.
But how is that helping with that connection to your residents? Because as you said, you are a level up. You're spending $350,000 for a campaign. I represent essentially 3 cities. Many of the people here represent one or portions of one city. And so how are you working on that transparency, that accountability? Because you don't have accountability to the legislature. There's tension with the cities and the counties that you mentioned. I'm just trying to figure out how that all works together. One, with such a small council, and two, with such a large, and a large base that you represent, but also that independence, maybe, that being a level above?
So we went to this model in 1992. I moved there in 93. So I can't speak to having lived through that conversation. But what I can tell you is that the Oregon Land Use Planning Program goal number 1 is community engagement. And that is taken very seriously. So I know that would have been part of this conversation. I think the value that you're placing on it is correct. The question is, what does that mean to you? And what does that mean to this committee? Is it one, it's almost like a school teacher, is it 1 per 25 or 1 per 35? And what's the effect of this, and how are you staffing it if it's 1 to 35, right? So I would say our council is understaffed for what we do. Because there's the resources to staff the council, right? I would do much more outreach as a Metro councilor if I had more staff to be able to do that. But I don't. It's something that we could grow over time. It's one of those conversations that we need to have. What I do know is the city of Portland just went through this, and they're moving from 5 to 13. So I think it's just what you value at this moment, and be able to articulate it and say why, because the cost is obviously bigger the more you have, especially if you're paying them. And I'm hoping if you move to that, you'd be paying them, because this is not a volunteer level job when you're trying to run a region. So I would just say, use your gut of what seems right for Minnesota, right, and your culture. I think that what they found with 13 in the region is that was, at the time, too many, but I also think that was coupled with personalities, and I also think that was coupled with the fact that the COO was elected, and there was this loggerhead. I think they wanted to streamline it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. So the last person on the list is Representative Koznick. Okay, how about this? Because we are going to need to wrap. So who still wants, okay, we have, I'm going to just be, the list now is Mayor Hovland. Chair Cleburne, did you want to? Okay, we're going to have Ms. Paddock. Anyone else here? Okay, and then Representative Koznick, and then at the end, let's try to get this done by about 11:35, so we have, or 11:35, so we can have TriMet. 11:35, we'll put an end here. So, Mayor Hovland.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got a few questions to ask, so I'll come back to you as we go from topic to topic. President Peterson, that's a good name for this part of the country, too, We appreciate that. In fact, some might argue that a lot of the smarter folks immigrated here, went on to Oregon and Washington, or just they couldn't take the cold like the rest of us and stick around here. But there's a lot of commonality between Washington, Oregon, and Minnesota, so we really appreciate you being here. You said at the very outset of your comments, when you were talking about the history of how you got to where you are now. Back in 1979, I was struck by the fact that you said that there was such a severe dislike of the COG form that they got rid of that in 1979, but you didn't articulate any of the reasons why people had such a disdain for I'll call it disdain for the COG form of governance. I'm wondering if you could comment on that first of all.
President Peterson, then we'll have a quick follow-up, and then we need to move on. President.
Chair, committee members, it's hard for me to know exactly what was motivating that. I've talked to people from that time period who are now retired, and I think it was a combination of not clear. It was direct legislation from the federal government and creation of a COG, right, in order to have the MPO function. And I don't think that it was clear on authority and probably personalities at the time, as well as Oregon has always been kind of a function of its scarce resources. So there would have been a lot, and there still is a lot of consternation over millions of dollars, not tens of millions of dollars, certainly not hundreds of millions of dollars. So it probably was a combination of all those things, of the clarity of authority and decision-making, and who in the room was getting the majority of the funds.
Thank you. I forgot my manners right off the bat, forgot what the chair told us all to do. And so I'm a mayor of a suburban community here in the Twin Cities. This is a legislative task force. But I'm also the chair of what's called the Transportation Advisory Board at the Met Council, which is somewhat akin to what you have.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, we make recommendations to the Met Council on how to spend those highway trust fund dollars, and they can either decide to accept our recommendations or reject those recommendations, but can't modify those recommendations. And then I'm also the chair of the Standing Committee on Transportation for the U.S. Conference of Mayors.
Oh, good.
And one of the vice chairs is in your neck of the woods, and that's Mayor Travis Stovall from
Yes.
Gresham,
Yeah.
who is the vice chair of transit. So that's kind of how I got to be involved in this legislation.
So is that the mayor we were referring to?
Pardon me?
Is that the mayor we were referring to?
No,
Did you ask?
the
Mayor?
former mayor, Charles Hales.
Charles Hales.
Oh, Charlie, okay.
Charlie Hales. Yeah.
Good, good.
Yeah, no, Travis, no, I hadn't asked him to testify, but Charlie Hales, I saw him at the U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting. He said he'd be happy to testify
Yep.
regarding his observations. And slide 5, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Yeah, this will be the last
Slide
question.
5 is that boundary there on, that shows the 6 councilor districts. Is that the urban growth boundary? Or is that the MPO boundary, or is that both?
It would be the MPO boundary. The urban growth boundary is inside the service
Inside the-
district, yeah.
okay. All right, that's
Excellent
just-
question, Mayor.
Yep, thank you. And then on slide 6, and this goes to one of the questions that Senator Pratt was raising, this might be important for us to know. You show the revenue sources for your work as the Met Council, but we don't see any cost side expenses. And I think for us to think about as one of the options in an elected body, you know, we'd probably want to analyze what are those kinds of costs that we could potentially see for paying somebody who's a counselor, or I'll call them a super county commissioner, or how big a staff do they have? What kind of expenses are they going to have? And so whatever you have along those lines that you could share with us in terms of those sort of built-in costs might be helpful to our analysis here as well. And then, Mr. Chair, thank you. What I got out of one of your earlier comments was that you had come to the conclusion after doing this work for quite a while that you opposed elected bodies, at least this is my interpretation, you opposed elected bodies controlling transit. Is that a fair characterization, what you said?
Personally, yes.
Personally, yeah. And your personal reasons for that are what?
Chair, I have worked all over this nation as a consultant in transportation. I have run agencies. My experience, and this is why I would encourage your research, is to look at who gets elected. How they're elected is important, but who gets elected and what are their values, and whether they are 100% in line with the mission of the agency to provide transit, or if they got elected because they are anti-transit.
Thank you.
That's very
I think it
helpful.
makes it very hard.
Mayor, I think we should move on. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm
I will, I think, President, I don't want to volunteer you, but I assume that if people still have some questions, they can contact you.
Yes.
Okay. And that's good advice. I think that this has been an item of conversation. I'm glad you asked the question, Mayor, and we do, I think, if this becomes something that a direction the task force wants to move, we probably should be consulting with some of these transit agencies that are elected. I think Denver has one, and we'll be talking with them.
Austin, Chair, can I just, one
Yes,
caveat?
quickly.
Having a body of elected officials is, to me, an important distinction.
For a transit.
Directly elected versus like a council of government setup. I actually think Puget Sound is the best example of an electeds in a body from across the region.
For a transit.
For transit
yeah.
governance, and the reason I liked it is because they already know how to work together, and they were all interested in bringing home as much transit as they possibly could. It was a different discussion. It was a different tenor.
Interesting. I appreciate that.
And I served
very
on that
much.
board, so.
I
yeah.
appreciate that. Okay, so members, just the next 5 minutes or so, we'll have, next, Ms. Paddock, I'd have Chair Cleavorn, and then we'll circle back to Representative Koznick for the last question. Ms. Paddock.
Yep, thank you again for coming here. I just I am from Minneapolis, and I'm the public member, and I've been involved at the grassroots level in transit and regional parks and municipal planning in Minneapolis. And I just have a very quick question. Can you describe your elections in terms of turnout and visibility? Does it get lost as kind of a, bottom of the ballot kind of consideration, or are people interested in it, and is it covered by the media and so forth?
President Peterson.
Chair. So there's a very large undervote. More people will vote for their city council than for Metro. Because it is hard to raise enough money to get the visibility, because it is this kind of invisible layer of government. So unless you have a stake in it, and we only have, a limited range of authority, there is a higher undervote.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Ms. Paddock. Okay, Chair Cleavorn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Madam President, it's great to have you with us. This has been a really informative and really great conversation. And maybe you could just do follow-up with us as opposed to trying to answer the question so that Representative Koznick can also get his question in. My concern was your statement about the scenario planning being values-based versus the governance model, and the answer that you just gave to Mayor Hovland was informative about what do you do if people have different values, right? The assumption is that everybody's working on the same values. And in this time of really divided government, how does that work, right? Maybe in Portland, you may have a space where you have more similar values as opposed to looking at the state that might have divided values, right? So how does that work? The other piece that you said that really gave me pause was that you haven't been able to pass any type of regional transit measure. To me, that's a very devastating statement, especially as a suburban legislator looking at how do we now pass the funding mechanisms that we need to build BRT or to build any other type of transit system now that we have density in those suburbs and exurbs, right? So how do we do that? Like I said, you don't have to try to answer this right now. And then the other question, you talked about a value being equity-based, and then you also made the statement that people love the urban growth planning structure because if you get one of those buffer zones in your backyard, whoa-ho, you have higher property value. So how does that square with the equity piece for people who are in higher density? Do they then have lesser values? And these are single residence values, right? If you're in high density, it could be that people, as opposed to the park in your backyard. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
So
Yeah, a couple of questions there, President.
Let me go to the middle one,
Yeah.
which was the transportation ballot measures, and JC can speak to it as well. I would encourage him to, because most of it has been Metro and TriMet going back and forth trying to get their. We don't have a sales tax. We have an employer payroll tax to pay for our transit, and that makes it much harder to pass anything at the ballot because then you have to go to property tax or an employee or employee payroll tax. So it's based on our structure of finance, first of all. And you have an asset that we do not have. Seattle has an asset that we do not have. Those areas with many more Fortune 500-based companies, we have 2 in the entire state. You have 17, 18. There's competition between them for educational, for quality of life, and those companies really want to work with you to make sure that they can attract talent. We don't have that in Portland, in our region. We have Nike, which is our only Fortune 500-based company. Intel does not play much at the quality of life conversation. They have a huge employee base. Oregon Health Science University has but we don't have that asset of, like, the Itasca project or Challenge Seattle that they do in Seattle. We don't have that coordinated business front so that we can get to coordinated values between the business community and other communities. So that's where the challenge for us lies, is every single time is getting the business community on board. Because it is many different voices and many different directions. So it's been a challenge. So that's the one I'll answer here in public, and then if you could help me with the other two.
Just one real quick follow-up.
If we
Chair
just stay
Cleveland.
focused on this one question.
Yeah.
Right, and, because it's a really huge one. So when you're thinking about balancing constituent needs, right, the question that I keep asking is, who is the constituent for Met Council? So you're talking about building the cohesive decision-making around businesses, cities, states, county, right?
And CBOs.
Right, and then where does the ordinary citizen fall into that? So it's just a question of who do you see as the constituent for your organization?
Chair,
Excellent
Committee
question.
members.
Thank you, President.
I think it depends, like, our level of community engagement is based on the level of the decision. So if it's an urban growth boundary expansion, it gets massive. If it's putting something to the ballot, we have 35-member committees, and then we do massive amount of community engagement, right? And a lot of our community engagement has even grown beyond what it was 25 years ago when I worked there, because now we are using those CBOs to be able to do our community engagement in the different languages and the different communities and their places where they feel safe. So that when the translation actually happens, it's done in a way where we've provided them the capacity to do plain language. They give us back plain language, right? Based on what they know of the culture and of what people have said. So we do an incredible amount of community engagement. I think we have 20 community engagement people just for Metro. I don't know if our 3 counties combined have 20 community engagement. Because it's hard to figure out at each level of decision, from an urban growth boundary to passing a ballot measure, what is the level and the intensity? And normally we start out and we're like, oh, we didn't get that right. We're going to have to go even further into something that we didn't even expect. But it's that learning loop environment that we continue to encourage. That it's not that we failed, it's that we've learned something new, and now we're going to have to accommodate. And I think that's where the region is like, oh, we trust Metro to take us through these things, because if we forget, if we didn't see, if we now understand, there's that extra level of push. So
Thank you.
it's a hard one to answer.
Thank you. And maybe some follow-up required. Last question is for Representative Koznick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Chair Peterson. You know, we've talked about the cost, Senator Pratt mentioned that, so that's significantly different than even our legislative races, and it's something for the task force to consider in terms of the size if you were to go this route, but certainly in Portland, the problem would be that it's much more expensive than even a typical Senate seat. There was some news about, well, I had asked earlier about the vetoes and that's more your management cycle.
So I don't have veto power.
Okay, then I was misinformed. Okay, I thought I read that it originally wasn't and then brought back, but okay, that's very interesting. But there was, you know, we've talked about the conflict of interests, and one of the things we're trying to solve is who our constituents are. You know, I think the Met Council is, my opinion would be that their actual constituency is the elected officials in the cities, the counties, and the townships, and that's why I think the chair
Correct.
put those
Yeah.
voices on this task force that have to help implement the policy of the Met Council here. But an elected, you know, we're a representative democracy. We're not a direct democracy. We're elected to represent and based on our values and ideas. But there also becomes, when you have more elected for a specific role of a regional planning, there can be conflicts of interest, and I'm going to share with the committee, and maybe you want to talk about it. There was 2 Metro councilors, their employers, who they work for, were receiving grants. And I think that's something that we should caution this task force with, is the conflict of interest of, one of the counselors got like 125,000, another was 326,000. And I think that's just something, another layer of complexity that we should be aware of as we try to make a recommendation, and happy to have your comments on that. I'll share that with the
And
committee.
Real quick, yes.
And then also the large donors that you'd mentioned, apparently now it's, I didn't quite get the logic between, but there certainly are
So,
people that are influencing the
yes.
elections.
Thank you.
quite
So
heavily.
a good set of questions. I think just the broader
Yeah.
context of campaign finance related issues and conflicts of interest among
So
elected
conflict
officials. So
of-
we'll do this as the last question briefly, and then we'll move on.
Chair, conflict of interest under state law is the person has to personally benefit. And the organizations that the counselors work for were given those grants, and those counselors did not make decisions on that grant making.
It's similar to our legislative.
So while perspective is everything, and we've had conversations, this is also a tension as we grow in order to have a more diverse council and have a younger council. These folks are working, and no matter where they worked, I don't know how you not touch somebody. You could be a lawyer, you could be, right, and you'd have a conflict of interest at some point, and you would have to recuse yourself. So I think part of what you're seeing is a good, healthy conversation about what does that mean. But I think until we pay these folks to have one job and one job only, because we have this problem in our state legislature all the time, and it affected our governor. It affected our Secretary of State. They are so underpaid that they take other jobs, and then somehow there's a conflict of interest, and then there's a scandal. So I think the state of Oregon needs to do some refinement around conflict of interest and be more clear about what that means. But as far as I'm concerned, it's a matter of how do we allow people to have one job and one job only.
Thank you. I appreciate the question, like, real quick. 'cause
Well, I
we're
just
running
wanted to point
behind.
out that, so if I understand right, the council positions at Metro are about $52,000 a year. But the cost of living is so high, as you'd mentioned, you need to make, $52,000 a year is about $25 something an hour. The chair had mentioned you need to earn about $26 an hour to afford a one-bedroom apartment. So
Correct.
obviously, there's a lot of problems in Portland, and affordability is one of them, but I don't think the elections serve that. But I
Yeah,
appreciate the comment, and that's a whole nother issue about pay.
And Representative
That's
Koznick,
always
I
hard.
think it's very important, as we discuss elections, is this a full-time job? Is it a part-time job? What is the salary? These are questions in addition to how many people are represented and what the cost of a campaign. I think we have to throw that into the mix as we're addressing this question. Madam President, thank you. And I
you.
really want to thank the task force too for some really excellent and insightful questions and listening and patience. And your patience and your thoughtful answers really are helpful to us. And, we appreciate, you're not only being here in person, but your willingness to continue to engage with us. This is an issue that comes up quite often. We've had a couple of bills over the years to elect our regional government, but, for a variety of reasons, those haven't advanced. But I think this year we're very interested in, looking at all kinds of governance structures. And I think your insights about transit versus planning and the advantages and disadvantages of both are important. So really quick, and then we're going to go to TriMet because we only have 15 minutes left.
Chair, just to close, I have the state motto tattooed on my back, and it's tattooed on my back for a very specific reason, and it's Alis volap per pris. Many think that it's she flies with her own wings. The she is referring to feminine, but in reality, it's referring to local government. So our state is very much about local control and local government. Metro is considered a local government. It is not considered some behemoth within the region. So I just want to leave you with that last factoid. In the culture of the state of Oregon, the state is not the end-all be-all to the majority of our citizens. Their mayor is more important. And so that might be slightly different than, the lens that you're putting on from the state of Minnesota, but I just wanted to, it's extremely important to have grassroots up, not top down. And so that's why it's on my back.
Appreciate that
To
very
remind me
much.
at all times.
Again, we appreciate, again, your presence here, and I think there's a lot that we've learned and a lot that we will reflect on and contemplate as we move forward. Thank you, and we appreciate it. And now, members, very related conversation. I think we're going to probably go about 5 minutes over because we have one testifier from the public that we want to make sure we get in, but we also want to make sure we have a presentation from TriMet. TriMet is the Metro Transit, if you will, of Portland, with one big difference between Metro Transit and the Met Council. This is a separate agency, as President Peterson mentioned, and we have had some discussion here already about an option to separate the transit function from the regional planning function. And that is where we're going to really learn about that, not broader issues around TriMet. So we have joining us by Zoom the Executive Director of Public Affairs, J.C. Vanetta, and he's going to talk about how TriMet engages and interacts with the Portland Metro. Of course, Portland Metro is what we just heard about, and provide some thoughts about governing structures for transit operations, which is going to be an ongoing conversation that we have moving forward. So, J.C. Vanetta, please welcome to our committee and our task force. Please state your name for the record. Proceed with your testimony. Maybe if you could keep it to 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll have 5 to 7 minutes of questions.
That sounds perfect. Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, we can hear you and see you.
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. I'm J.C. Vanetta. I'm the Executive Director of Public Affairs for TriMet. We are the transit operator in Portland. I'm so happy to be with you. While I'm not from Minnesota, I have a lot of family in Bemidji, if you know where that's at. So just know that I have a connection to Minnesota. And a quick hi and thank you to Metro Council President Lynn Peterson. We're grateful for her leadership. She is a huge supporter of transit. And I just want to let you know, I was actually out in Minneapolis in April for a conference earlier this year, and I just want to give a shout out to all of the folks at Metro Transit. They hosted the conference.
J.C. Vanetta, can you maybe speak a little closer to the microphone, a little slightly louder, I think, because we're in a large room here.
Sure. Does that work?
Okay, yeah, proceed. I think we'll manage.
Okay, thank you so much. I was at a conference earlier this year in Minneapolis, and your Metro Transit hosted the conference, and they did such an amazing job. You have such a tremendous asset in the transit system. I've been with TriMet for 17 years and in the transit industry for 23 years. A quick overview of TriMet. We began operations in 1969 and has grown from a bus-only company to a multimodal regional leader. We have 76 bus lines, 1 high-capacity bus line, 5 light rail lines, 1 commuter rail line, and paratransit service that crosses across 533 square miles of our service district, over 3 of Oregon's most populated counties. While we don't own the Portland streetcar, our employees operate and maintain the service. We are a special municipal district of the state. Our board, 7 members who represent various districts across our region, are appointed by the governor. As you heard from Chair Peterson, we are funded by an employer payroll tax, and most recently, a new employee payroll tax that helped fund our expansion. We have the highest favorability rating of any government in the Portland region, including our state government. TriMet really keeps our community moving, economy strong, and our air clean. We're working to make our service better, truly, through key partnerships like you heard with Metro. And I would say that we work hand in glove with Metro. We're working on several projects right now with them, and there are days when we forget who we're working for because we're working together, moving everything forward. Now, you heard Chair Peterson say that while Metro does our regional transportation planning, when it comes to transit, they're focused on the high-capacity transit lines and how it works with our land use policies. We then take those plans, build and operate those lines. We also plan and execute all of the service outside of the high-capacity lines. So that's for neighborhood service, et cetera. We average about 1.3 million rides per week. That's down 3.8% before the pandemic. That's down 33.8% before the pandemic. But we continue to see our ridership rise. We have undertaken a huge effort we call Forward Together, which has really helped us reimagine our bus network given the changes that the pandemic has brought to our region. We're going to be launching an effort called Forward Together 2, which will continue our journey as we provide greater access to opportunities for people that live throughout our region. Now, I heard a mention earlier about safety and security, and safety and security in Portland to be exact. You should know that after the George Floyd murder, Portland experienced 120 days of riots and protests, and it really hit home for TriMet. And we heard loud and clear and began an entire movement internally that we reimagined our own safety and security efforts. We listened to the community and implemented over 20 recommendations to bolster our safety and security efforts. While we say that what you experience on a sidewalk, you will most likely experience on TriMet, on our transit system. We have worked incredibly hard to change that and to make our system safer with more and more unarmed presence on our system, and it's working as we are seeing ridership grow. I'll stop there to answer any questions. Hopefully the audio is cleared up a little bit.
We'll have questions, and I think, again, members, I'd like to really limit this or focus this on some governance issues. Again, the relationship between the transit agency and the broader metro. I think if people have questions, if they don't, I certainly have a couple. So, members, do you have questions about this particular? Representative Weens and Senator Pratt. Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, sir, for your presentation. You alluded to your Operation Forward Together. Is that the public safety, or is that a post-pandemic consolidation of different ridership? Over.
It's a post-pandemic review of all of our service to make sure that, because during the pandemic, we had a lot of shift in our region where people were living, because now we had people move to the outskirts of our region, out to that urban growth boundary, as Chair Peterson talked about. So it's really a movement and an effort to figure out what our riders need more. We've actually changed up a lot of our bus routes, and we still have a lot more to do. So it's really an effort around that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Pratt.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and you teed up my question perfectly. I'd like to hear from Mr. Vanetta about the relationship between TriMet and Metro from his perspective. I thought President Peterson gave us a really good overview. And I don't mean to put words in her mouth, but I'm going to paraphrase a little bit that, she kind of looked at our Met Council being the operator of transit as beneficial because there are some tensions, some differences of opinion. I'd like to get your thoughts on that comment as well. So about the relationship and about the comment of merging the two.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. You asked my question, too.
Thank you, Chair, members. I would say we have a very good relationship with Metro. And I think that what the tensions that Chair Peterson was talking about are really with some of our elected officials in various counties within the region. And only because with Metro and TriMet, chances are 99.9% of the time we want the same thing because we want land use. We want to put transit where there's high density. We want for the overall operation and essentially cost per ride. We want all of what Metro wants, clean air, DEI, all of those different things. So 99.9% of the time, Metro and TriMet are hand in glove. And I would also say that Metro does an amazing job for our region in its planning efforts. You heard Chair Peterson talking about the engagement efforts, which is massive, absolutely massive. And I think that a lot of those tensions do lie not necessarily, well, and even with both Metro and with TriMet, with some of the elected officials, because they may not have the same desires that we have as far as trying to put transit in areas and/or building density in areas where we can provide greater levels of transit. I hope that answers your question.
We'll have Mayor Hovland, then I'll ask the last question, and we'll have our one public testifier. Mayor Hovland.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Vanetta, thanks for being with us. President Peterson told us that in the initial part of her comments that TriMet was composed of a council or a board appointed by the governor of Oregon. Could you elaborate a little bit more about the structure of that governance model?
Yeah. So our governor appoints our board members. Each board member can serve 2 4-year terms. We have a president, a vice president, and a secretary treasurer. We meet monthly, and they are all appointed by the governor. And that has been by purpose because, as Chair Peterson had mentioned, a lot of elected boards, and 3% of all transit boards in the U.S. are elected, or I should say only 3% of the transit boards across the U.S. are elected. And that really has to do with some electeds bringing their own partisan politics to the table instead of our appointed board, which they put all of those politics aside and really look at the greater good for the transit system. While they represent districts, and they do go out and they do speak to the people in their districts, and our members contact them, they do represent those districts. They do for the good of the entire agency, and I think that has been a success for TriMet.
I think I missed right off the bat how big the board is.
There's 7. 7 board members, 7 districts. They each represent about 237,000 people.
Excellent questions, Mayor.
All right, thank you.
And so I'll do the last question. And would you say, and again, obviously, just like for a MPO or Metro Council structure, we have the choice of direct election, elected officials, state-appointed officials. Those are the big 3, but of course, there may be some hybrid versions of these. But would you say that this arrangement of separating the transit function from the regional governance function, would you say it's working in Portland? You said 99% of the time you get along, but is this a model that you feel works? And again, I think in many, not all, but many places, this is the arrangement. Here we have it together. So is it something that works, or would you want to be part of Portland Metro?
I would say this, Chair, thank you for that question. It's working. It is working with what we have, and I would say Metro does an amazing job when it comes to the planner. When Chair Peterson said she was the convener, or Metro was the convener, that truly is it, because it's bringing people around the table, talking about land use, talking about where our city centers are going to be and where growth will be. And so quite literally, they're having that conversation at a much higher level than TriMet. While we're part of that conversation, they're bringing everyone together. And so they're taking on the major goal of land use, housing, all of these different things, and they're really good at it, where we are taking on the transit component, which we're really good at. And so I think that this separation does work for us, and I think it's us working together to make sure it all works together. And so I would say right now what we have is absolutely working.
Okay, and last question. So you don't see it's not as if you would want to be in it. You think there's advantages to be separate? And that'll be my last question.
I think so, and I would say this, because Metro's board is elected, and so their elected board brings those concerns to the table and brings not necessarily partisan to the table, because our Metro councilors aren't necessarily partisan. They do bring views of their districts to the table. And remember, they're really looking at that much larger picture, where our board is really focused on bringing more transit to neighborhoods too. And while it's different, I would say that, with Metro's elected board taking on that much larger picture, yeah, it definitely helps because it gives our appointed board a little bit of cover, I would say, but it also gives our board some reassurance that, all the lines have been crossed, I's dotted, all of those things, so that we can focus more on delivering the transit service to our riders each and every day.
Thank you, that's very helpful. And again, J.C. Vanetta, I hope if this is okay, I don't want to necessarily volunteer you, but would it be okay then if members had some questions, we can get your email and then?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate both of you, again, our guests from Portland, helping inform our conversation and your willingness to engage with us as follow-up. And again, thanks to the task force members. We have one public testifier who, I don't know who that is, but if there is someone either, I'm sorry.
What should say?
I had it here and I'm sorry, Jerry Pitstrick from the Eden Prairie Planning Commission is here with us, and please state your name for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Well, thank you, everyone, for allowing me to join you for just a few minutes. I'm actually not on the Planning Commission at this time.
Okay.
That was a position I had back in 2006 to
I
2013.
I see. I wasn't even reading the excellent
Okay.
preparatory notes that Ms.
Sure.
Kohler gave.
I'm actually a civil structural engineer. I've been self-employed with a small consulting business for the last 25 years. My wife and I closed down the business at the end of last year, so I'm now a free-to-use public servant. With the consulting business that we had, what I did was I worked with major projects all around the country, providing services on how to improve project management and continuous improvement across organizational lines on major projects. I've worked in 48 states. I've worked in 5 countries. I've worked on over $1 billion worth of rail projects for Washington, D.C. Metro Transit Authority. I worked with a rail project in Denver. I worked with a rail project in Sacramento. I worked with a bus rapid transit project in Fort Collins, Colorado. So I have experience with a broad range of kinds of projects, many different kinds of contract delivery methods. And I'd just like to give you 2 or 3 comments about what I've heard here. I like the idea of the TriMet. Please separate the design and construction from the sausage making. We need to be focused on the technical aspects of how do you most effectively really do a good, complete design in a project and then implement the construction. And when you're looking at who's on the commission, please don't have elected commissioners overseeing design and construction. Have appointed people. In fact, what I would suggest right now is between now and next April, appoint 2 or 3 at-large commission members who have expertise in design and construction to help you get through the next 3 years of finishing out the Southwest Light Rail project. The challenge is that in most government agencies, the government employees are the specialists, and you're looking for outside input from the community that they take into consideration in their decision-making process. Unfortunately, when you look at major light rail projects, the availability of expertise is really limited. And so you look at the commission right now, or the Met Council, you have to go down 2 or 3 levels before you get to an engineer. But where's the money being spent? It's in this engineering, both the design and the construction. When you hired somebody to be in charge of construction for the Southwest Light Rail project, how easy was it for the council to find candidates, good qualified candidates? They hired somebody that was really very good, but his background was working for the State Department doing embassies overseas. There's tremendous competition to get people that have the background in doing this kind of work. Engineering firms are having huge problems finding people to fill this role. So how that plays down to projects that we would do in the state of Minnesota is that the drawings that come out of engineering firms aren't as good today as they were 10 years ago. So it puts more burden on the state to do a better job of reviewing those drawings and figure out where all the challenges are and deal with those before you get to the construction, because in the contracting business, there's more competition than ever now, too. So when they bid a job, they're looking for more opportunities to figure out how to get more money out of the contract in order to make up for any errors that they may have had. You look at the projects like this, like the Southwest Rail, and the contract is $1 billion, let's say. They're given generally about 2 months to bid $1 billion job. How would you like that experience? And when you're looking at bidding construction jobs, you're bidding the construction of a one-off project. You're building basically a prototype. You don't have the opportunity to go through and have multiple iterations to figure out all the problems and then do it. You have to do it right from the start. And so there's huge pressures on the contracting community to really be successful on these kinds of jobs. When you talk about compensation for people, from what I was able to find online, the highest paid person in the Met Council makes about $165,000 a year. Right now, for the Southwest Rail project, there's 2 project managers. It's a joint venture. I would guess that each of those project managers make between $225,000 and $250,000 a year. So when you're going out and looking for people to manage this kind of construction, there's a huge amount of competition to get those folks. Also, it's hard to grow those people within an organization because there isn't continuity of projects. You know, the last light rail project that you did was from Minneapolis to St. Paul. That was 10 years ago. How many of those people are still within the Met Council? The leadership is all gone. And so people are having to learn on the job, and that's just a huge, huge challenge. And so anyway, I have a lot of other ideas, but I know you're very compressed on time.
Well-
And so Taylor has my contact information, and if there's any way that you think I can help you in the future, give me a call.
Well, thank you very much, and appreciate your insights. You sort of a segue to the very last thing, that announcement I want to make, and that is we are finalizing our calendar for the public engagement meetings, which you can elaborate on. You can show up in person or via Zoom.
Okay.
And we have postponed one we were going to have Monday night in St. Paul to December 7th. We are going to be looking at December 14th in East Metro, likely Lake Elmo, but we'll let everybody know on that final, location. But that'll be December 14th. And then we're looking in January at a meeting in Minneapolis, and then also in Shakopee. Those would be the 4. So again, we're going to have an arrangement where some people will be here, some people will be on site, and we'll also have the hybrid option. So anybody from anywhere in the region can testify at any of these 4 meetings, but we wanted to, choose some communities that, have a lot of impact here, and we'll be keeping our testimony, somewhat confined to governance issues, but obviously people have other, they come to governance from issues that they have experienced, with the Met Council. And so we'll have a combination of citizens, county commissioners, mayors, developers, others who have a stake. I think working with our partners, this list of what Portland provided, I think is a pretty good one in terms of us. But that conversation we're going to have next week, I'm calling an audible. My fellow football fan will appreciate this. We are going to spend, I think, the bulk of our time continuing the conversation we started last week about values, about outcomes, what we would like to see in a governance structure. That's a critical conversation. So that's going to be next week. And we're also thinking we've invited some people from Boston. It was suggested that Boston was an interesting model for us to look at. And I would, again, ask people to come to myself, to Taylor, if you have other regions of the country where we could have a similar conversation as that we had with people in Portland. And so we do have one also already lined up for right after Thanksgiving, our meeting on the 29th. We'll be hearing from Denver. They have a COG. They also have a separate transit agency as well. But there's other regions that have other models, and we ask members of the task force to come to us. We will be very open. This worked well, I think, to have have someone on Zoom and then someone in person as well. So any other questions or comments from the task force? With that, we stand adjourned until next week, and then we don't have a meeting on the 15th, and then we'll have a meeting on the 29th. We are adjourned.